Story 1, you had to take pictures carefully because you had to pay for the film in the camera, drop it off to be developed, and then return to pick it up. Story 2, calling your friend's landline and having to talk to their parents first. Story 3, who else remembers waiting for your favorite song to come on the radio just so you could hit record on your cassette player? That was our version of a music playlist. Story 4, having every one of your friend's phone numbers memorized in your head, using the 3-inch wide phone book to look up a number for whatever reason. The yellow pages also always doubled as an impromptu seat booster for little toddlers who needed to sit at a table. Story 5, chewing red tablets demonstrates how poor our toothbrushing was. Story 6, flipping through all the channels before realizing there is nothing I want to watch. Story 7, when you missed a television show, you missed it. Reruns were not a thing. Story 8, parents, be home by 6 o'clock without looking up or caring where you go or who you are with. Story 9, was just talking about it. Waiting a week for a Saturday morning cartoon lineup and waiting weeks for reruns if you missed an episode. Story 10, having to find a phone to make a call. Going with friends, playing outside, mom not worrying unless you were late for dinner, and even then being more mad than worried when you showed up. Riding a bike with no helmet. Drinking Kool-Aid made from a 5-cent package full of cyclamates. Hitchhiking. I am not saying this is all good, but they will most likely not get to do these things. Story 11, being told that you have to learn harder mathematics because you will not always have a calculator in your pocket, and then always having a calculator in your pocket. Story 12, watching the squiggly lines and false colors to try and see images on broadcasted pay television after midnight. Story 13, the utter disappointment of finding out that the computer you just logged on to has Adobe Flash games blocked. Story 14, opening a dictionary, encyclopedia, or atlas to look something up. Story 15, taking off on my bike, riding through a trail in the woods by myself. An unofficial trail made by kids like me. Adults did not really know about it. I ran into other kids from nearby neighborhoods. It was both cool and sometimes scary. We would do whatever crazy things we came up with, usually involving who could jump the furthest or telling strange stories that you thought were not true but could not verify. However, if you ran into a bully and their backup, nobody would help. Nobody even knew where you were or expected to see you before sunset. Story 16, answering the phone without knowing who was calling beforehand. As a child, answering the phone was exciting because it was completely unpredictable who was on the other end. Could be your best friend wanting to talk about the episode of The X-Files you both just watched, or it could be someone trying to sell you steak knives. Easier times. Story 17, slamming the phone shut to end a heated argument. Pressing the red touchscreen button does not have the same effect. Story 18, rationing long-distance telephone time because it was very expensive per minute. Story 19, finding a stack of Playboy magazines in the woods and sharing them with your friends all summer. Story 20, accidentally closing your flip phone during an argument and having to call back angry all over again. Story 21, radio turning into records, turning into 8-tracks, turning into cassettes, turning into compact discs, turning into MP3 players, turning into applications on your phone, turning back to vinyl playing on a vintage turntable. Been there, done that. Story 22, having a question and receiving a poor answer from your parents with no other source to consult. Story 23, looking at a map to choose your route and learning the geography of the area. Story 24, text adventures. Okay, not every kid, just the nerdy ones. Story 25, bringing your report card home, either proud or terrified to show your parents. Now, parents simply log in to a website and see the grades instantly. Story 26, waiting all day for the disc jockey to play your song on the radio, with the record and pause buttons on, and then trying to stop recording before the disc jockey started talking again. Story 27, rewinding a music tape with songs recorded from the radio using a pencil after it got stuck in the player. Story 28, hardwired telephones and the respect given to them. I'm sorry, she can't come to the phone. It's too late for calling at 9 p.m. Story 29, burning compact discs with your ultimate mix. You had to. 1. Steal music off LimeWire. 2. Infect the family computer with 47 viruses. 3. Burn a compact disc labeled Bad Boy Mix in Sharpie. Story 30. As a 13-year-old, having to watch a photo download from dial-up for several minutes, deciding to give up when a picture finally appeared. Story 31. The sense of anticipation copying code from a paper magazine into your computer's memory to play a game. The deflation when it does not work because you have made a mistake somewhere, and you have to start from scratch. Tangentially, I also wonder if the trend of looking at computer game graphics and thinking, this is it, graphics cannot possibly get any better than this, every few years will continue. Story 32. The freedom we had in the 1970s and 1980s. Say what you will, but there will never be another generation like us. Story 33. Being left alone. Truly alone. For better or worse, alone. Story 34. The ability to tell time on the face of a clock. Not a digital clock, but an actual clock. Story 35. Playing outside. Dial-up internet. Renting a videocassette recorder or laserdisc player to watch the movie you rented. Deciding to use channel 3 or 4 to hook up your computer or console game. Dial tones. Party lines. Waiting to talk to your friends because your sister is using the phone. Writing a letter on thin paper so you can afford to send it. Making a shooter out of a soda can tab. Calling cards. Payphones. Manual transmissions. Boxcar derbies. Waiting months to get something you ordered from a catalog or catalogs in general. Story 36. Being outdoors from breakfast to dinner with quick breaks. No phones. Family calls. Story 37. We did not have TikTok. Instead, kids could just start dancing for fun, anywhere, anytime, for just a few seconds to get live likes. Story 38. Spending the entire day during summer away from home while my parents were at work. I would return around 5 p.m. when my parents were going to be home soon for dinner. Where did I go? Where didn't I go? Story 39. Riding bikes through the neighborhood and around town with a few friends from 3rd grade until you get a license to drive. Kids today are usually only allowed to ride their bikes on their own street, and only if their parent is outside and never out of sight. It's really a shame. I remember getting home from school, immediately grabbing my bike, meeting up with a few friends in my neighborhood, riding to the next neighborhood to grab a few more, and then riding around anywhere we could get to until well after the streetlights came on. On weekends, it was practically a free-for-all and survival of the fittest until sunrise. Story 40. Leaving school at the start of the holidays and not knowing, or even having a way to find out, what the vast majority of the other children were doing for the next several weeks. Story 41. The pandemic forced telepresence into the mainstream and eliminated the concept of snow days in education. Story 42. Coming home midday on the weekend with your parents and hopping on your bike to find your friends. Are they at a friend's house? No bikes out front at any friend's house, so move on. Time to hit the hangouts. The well, Fort 1, the woods behind the elementary school, the cornfields, the ditches. Better ride home, but be back when the streetlights come on. Story 43. Being completely unreachable the moment you walked out the door. Story 44. Lying on my back in the dark listening to Dark Side of the Moon for the very first time. Story 45. Throwing your game controller at the screen and the screen not breaking. Story 46. The utter stress and anxiety of term papers, or written assignments in general, required trips to the library. If it was an assignment for the entire class, you had to race there to check out books before they were gone. Then, you'd procrastinate like nothing else, especially during football season. Weeks would go by, and the term paper was due on a Friday. It was Sunday night, and you forgot that brilliant opening sentence you came up with 2 months ago. This is not to mention the hours spent in the library looking up materials in the index card system, scouting around to take out the books. Then, if and when you finally started the term paper, you had to remember to note the information for every footnote, the source, date, country of origin, and other details. All this while threading through a mass of people in the public library. Certainly, term papers, essays, or theses were not researched and written in the privacy of a bedroom, in underwear with a private bathroom down the hall. Story 47. Make sure you are home by the time the streetlights come on. Story 48. Making a school list on the first day of things to buy for school, including pencil, notebooks, eraser, and ruler. Story 49. Navigating through the world with a paper map at best and mostly just your sense of direction. Story 50. Dying of dysentery or accidentally being shot by a bullet. Oh, cannot forget snake bites either. Story 51. Calling a friend's home and politely asking the person on the other end of the line if so-and-so was free to talk. Even worse, asking a girlfriend's parents if she was home. Story 52. If you missed a television show episode, you just missed it. It is gone. Story 53. Unsupervised play for hours with friends as children in the neighborhood. Riding bicycles everywhere. Playing in fields and woods. Home for lunch, then home for dinner. Story 54. The rarity of air conditioning. Hot day before school lets out for summer. Those open windows do not help, and you cannot wear shorts. You play outside in the summer, especially once it is hotter inside than outside. Your family goes shopping or out to eat because stores and restaurants have air conditioning, but the ride there is in a hot car with the windows down. Swimming pools are how you keep cool in the summer, or basement recreation rooms, or Polish living rooms. Story 55. Timing your bathroom breaks for commercials or flipping between two shows on the 3 channels you had because you wanted to see both, and if you were lucky, they had different commercial breaks. My sister used to audio record the A-Team. I think she stopped when she realized how little dialogue there actually was. 5 minutes of them building something and 2 minutes of them shooting up the bad guys or the military, without a single person dying. That happened several times an episode. On that note, I remember the first time I saw a good guy kill someone on television. It was shocking. The good guy, who was a literal spy, had a mini breakdown because, "I killed him, Jim. I'm not sure if I can do this." This was in the 1980s Mission Impossible, when Max throws a throwing star back at the person trying to kill him. Story 56. Eagerly poring over the weekly television listings, hoping to find a rare late-night movie showing. Story 57. Watching a show on television, then going to school the next day to talk with all your friends about it. We all saw the exact same episodes. Story 58. If you wanted to know something, you asked an adult and accepted whatever they said as the truth, or you had to get an adult to take you to a library to look up information that was most likely outdated. Story 59. Looking up the showtime of a movie at your local theater in the newspaper. Prank phone calls, hours of fun. Calling information. Calling operator. Car seats only for babies who could not hold themselves upright. Following the bouncing ball. Playing in appliance boxes for most of a day. Making go-karts out of anything with wheels and racing friends down hilly streets. Rubber overshoes worn over leather shoes in the rain. The call of fight. In school halls and a crowd gathering when 2 jocks decided to punch each other. Teachers only breaking it up if the crowd got too big, the fight too bad, or the bell had rung. Story 60. Reading the shampoo bottle ingredient list while going to the bathroom. Story 61. Having shame and humility and being able to use critical thinking. Story 62. Lining up inside the shopping mall and sleeping overnight for concert tickets. Spending the entire day in an authentic arcade. Being able to easily disconnect from the world for a day or two without anyone becoming upset. Story 63. Dialing a long-distance number with an actual dial and getting the last number wrong, so you have to start all over again. Story 64. Knowing how to read a map is important. When going on a road trip, the co-pilot, sometimes a child, was responsible for paying attention and reading the map to relay directions to the driver. If you got lost, you stopped at a gas station to ask for directions or read the map displayed on the wall. Now, we have global positioning system navigation on the phone or in the vehicle. You simply enter your destination and press go. The interaction between driver and co-pilot has changed. Story 65. Growing up without social media, at least for some of our childhood, was different. I was born in 1996, and most of my recollected childhood is around 2003 to 2014. We had a few good years before the social media boom. Story 66. Being told Wikipedia is not a legitimate source for writing essays, downloading music from LimeWire, burning CDs, dial-up internet, and cool kids had the Sidekick, BlackBerry, bright-colored Razor phones, or chocolate phones, while uncool kids had Motorola or flip phones. iPods were for music and early iPhones were just phones. Story 67. Having to go to the library to look up the answer to something. Story 68. Ugh, vomiting and showering after gym class. It was a large open room with no privacy walls or partitions. Story 69. You need some physical activity to entertain yourself, stay connected to family, and talk to them. Story 70. Nothing on television. 3 networks plus public broadcasting service had many hours, but kids do not have anything to watch. No internet, no streaming. Story 71. A time before personal telephones were common and before the internet existed. Story 72. Bicycle rides with small music players without delicate displays that they used to fit on the bikes or belts. Story 73. Playing solitaire while talking on the landline because you had to give up dial-up. Story 74. If you wanted to play video games, the television had to be on channel 3. Story 75. Getting surprised by people showing up and knocking on the door. Story 76. Having to use physical books to look things up, such as encyclopedias, dictionaries, and thesauruses. Story 77. Going outside to play for 12 hours without anyone wondering if you are alive. Also, knowing where the water taps are at the schools and churches so you do not pass out. Story 78. Just riding dirt bikes, not motorcycles, with friends all around our part of town. Hitting many dirt bike paths with jumps and loving every second of it. Story 79. Blowing into game cartridges as if it were a sacred ritual. Story 80. Crack open a book at the library and look at an index for anything that resembles a possible answer. Story 81. The jokes, the stretching of the truth, innuendo, gossip, and for some, pulling the fire alarm even without a fire emergency. The problem today is that everybody thinks they are a master at everything, as long as there is battery power. Otherwise, there is silence, panic, and embarrassment. Story 82. Dirty magazines were found in the woods. No one ever asked how they got there. It was almost mystical. We learned a lot about ourselves that way. Story 83. How easy it was to watch the same television shows as your friends. Most of us had access to Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and Disney Channel, so we all knew and loved the same shows. Story 84. Sitting with family with the television off, talking about family history. Not that people cannot do it now, I just do not see it. As a baby boomer, my parents and grandparents grew up without television and only had a radio if they could afford it. My parents were used to talking to entertain themselves. I learned that my grandmother's mother, who immigrated from Ireland, died when she was young and sat on her coffin on the train when going to other family. My dad was put up for adoption in the newspaper, and that is how my grandmother found him. My mom quit school at 16 to go to work to support her family at the end of the Great Depression and never got a diploma. The best day of the week was when the Iceman brought the block of ice for the icebox because he would give them ice chips out of the truck. And in the summer it was heaven. Story 85. Randomly showing up at a friend's house, knocking on the door, and asking if you can play. If the answer is no, ride your bike somewhere else. Story 86. When you conduct research, you truly need to explore the subject in depth. We do not use Google because we existed before Google was created. Story 87. Memorizing cable television channels and their schedules, or using a TV guide to find something to watch. Story 88. Playing a game on your Nintendo DSi. Some games have sounds that play when you close the device, such as Mario 64 saying, "Bye-bye," when you close it. Story 89. What it was like to get your butt blistered with a belt or paddle. Story 90. Finding a woodland porn stash. You never see pornography on woodland walks anymore. Story 91. Going to Video Easy every Friday night with mom and dad, or at least one parent. Renting a new release video or a couple of them with your parents. I used to get a Sega Mega Drive game at the same time to play and return it on Sunday, paying late fees. Story 92. Your school had a directory that was distributed each year with every student's name, phone number, and address. Story 93. DK Zone and the old Chuck E. Cheese animatronic that would scare me. Story 94. Dangerous playgrounds and parks. It blew my mind as a 5-year-old and still blows my mind now that there were flying foxes in primary schools and parks. The 4-floor forts, from memory probably 1.2 to 1.3 meters high each floor, with nets and other features were awesome. Those crazy 6-meter high slides where you burned yourself going down. Story 95. Having to schedule your computer time around your siblings and whether your parents had phone calls to make. Story 96. We all used to be in the same room with one console and multiple controllers playing games instead of staring at screens watching someone else play. Story 97. Trying to figure out what movie you wanted to rent at Blockbuster. Story 98. Having to pull out the Thomas Brothers map book from under the car seat to find directions. Let's see. Look up the road to find it starts on page 45. The road goes off the top edge, so go to page 57. Find where that road picks up, crosses to the left edge. Look where the arrow points to the next secret page to turn to. Felt like reading a choose-your-own-adventure book. Story 99. At the start of December, getting out old magazines or whatever and circling the toys you want for Christmas. Also, searching for flash games to play, Y8 games and Friv for school, how I miss you. Story 100. You have to be home at your television set at exactly 7:45 Eastern Standard Time on Thursday night to make sure you have time to adjust the antenna to get the channel clearly. Take the telephone off the hook, make sure you use the restroom, and prepare your snack before you sit down to watch the next episode of your favorite television show. Story 101. Using an encyclopedia at the library to do a history report. Dialing a rotary phone. Listening to the time lady on the phone. At the tone, the time will be calling directory assistants to find a business number. 8-inch floppy disks on the first Radio Shack computer. When random access memory was $100 per megabyte. Loading your favorite computer game from a cassette tape. 8-track tapes in your car. Quadraphonic stereos and 8-tracks. Film strips and slide projectors in school. Hearing the tagline in color as the FBI show came on. Having to get up and change the channel so your parents could watch their shows. Saturday morning cartoons. Playing 45 RPM records in a record store before you bought the disc. 5-cent calls on a payphone. Elevator operators. The big Hollywood Christmas specials. Paul Harvey. Good day. Story 102. Elvira or Svengholi shitty Saturday night McCabe movies with narration by geeky personalities. Story 103. Entertaining yourself. In the car, creating an imaginary skateboarding Tony the Tiger who would skateboard along the power lines. Story 104. I have a smallpox vaccination scar on my shoulder. I do not think they do that anymore. Story 105. Slamming a flip phone shut after an argument is unmatched. That snap is not just a sound. It is like hitting delete on your anger in real life. Story 106. Calling every video store in the 3 nearest towns to see if they had a copy of a new release, then rushing over in the hope of getting it before someone else arrives. Story 107. Strict dress codes at school required girls to wear a dress or skirt of a specific length. Boys had to keep their shirts tucked in and wear a belt. Jeans were not allowed, but they were not common at that time. Story 108. Having to spend a day at the library making copies from encyclopedias to complete a project. Story 109. Having to turn the television on 10 minutes before your show started so it could warm up, or you would miss the beginning of your show. Story 110. When you want to watch a television show, you need to watch it at the scheduled time, not whenever you want. Story 111. Required gym suits for physical education class. They spent more time on you than with you. Getting paddled in school. Glass clackers. I had them but still don't understand why anyone would make them out of glass. Atari video games. Riding down the road at 60 miles per hour in the back of a pickup truck. Having to wear your siblings' hand-me-down clothes. Home telephones without call waiting. The busy signal was very annoying. The slow speed of dial-up internet. Having only 3 channels on the television and needing an antenna to barely see them. Watching the spinning wheel before the TV stations came on in the morning and hearing the national anthem when they signed off at night. Story 112. Blowing into the cartridge before physically loading the game into the game system with the television on channel 3 while drinking orange powdered astronaut juice. Story 113. Calling a friend on their landline and making small talk with one of their parents before you get to speak to your friend. Story 114. Having no choice but to go to the library and read books to complete a school paper. Story 115. Weekends in summer, chores are done by lunchtime. Mom always said what time dinner was. We would organize between 2 or 3 boys to see how many dinners we would get by inviting each other over. Story 116. If you were lost somewhere without a phone to tell you where to go, and no way to have someone pick you up, unless you managed to get to a payphone and call someone or went into a gas station and found a map to help you navigate. Story 117. The sheer panic of hearing you have got mail while your parents were in the next room. Story 118. Waiting for dial-up internet to connect. Also singing along to the strange screeching sound it made. Story 119. Just running off to roam the neighborhood with no way to be contacted, and worrying about whether you get home before sunset to avoid trouble. Story 120. Halloween is a fun holiday where you run around the surrounding neighborhoods with all your friends, hoping you will run into the girls' group. This trunk or treat event my nieces and nephews have to endure is very disappointing. I would have hated Halloween if that was all there was. Dressing up is only a small part of the fun that Halloween represents. Story 121. Being out of reach when you were at a friend's house and decided to go somewhere. Half the time, my parents did not know where I was when I was a kid. We did not have cell phones, so the words, "I am heading over to friend's house," basically meant I was out of reach of them, and I could not reach them either. Be home before dinner was about the only thing they could say. Story 122. I'm an early to mid-generation X, so I experienced the transition from having no computers to using them. I had to educate my parents on simple things like running video games that they thought were hacking the defense mainframe. Heavy metal was considered the most evil thing on the planet, including hair metal. Story 123. The thrill of opening a fresh pack of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards at recess. Story 124. Your dad tricked you into changing the channel on an old television. Story 125. Falling asleep while watching television and waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to nothing but static. Story 126. Waiting for the film in your camera to be full, then taking the film to get it developed, and hoping that you did not put your finger over the lens. Story 127. Walking to a friend's house to ask if they want to hang out, or calling their landline and talking to their parents. Using a paper map in the car, missing a turn because you did not see the sign for Road 167. Driving for ages without having a clue if you were going in the right direction. Story 128. Running barefoot on grass, streets, and almost all surfaces all day long. Story 129. Using the encyclopedia to look up a fact and having the complete set in the house. Story 130. Having to ride or walk to a friend's house to see if they were home and were allowed to come out and play after school. Then getting home late and getting in trouble because your parents were driving around looking for you. Story 131. Waiting all day in the summer for your favorite song to come on the radio, hit record on the cassette player, add it to your playlist, and go hoop. Story 132. A mediocre Samsung phone and phones with a physical home button. That was about 8 years ago. Story 133. Multiple Grand Theft Auto games were released during each console generation instead of just one game every few console generations. I was already in my 20s and not a kid anymore when this was most relevant. Story 134. Having to keep the only telephone line open for that one important call that day. Being outside, and your parents had no way to contact you until you went home when the streetlights came on. Story 135. Your Discman had to be at a specific angle to work while you were moving. You also had to manage the cable of your headphones through your jacket to keep the Discman in the correct position. Before that, self-made mixtapes were made from radio snippets on cassettes for your Walkman. Story 136. Not being able to watch a TV show, movie, or online content anytime if they are bored. I was with my boyfriend's family for a week. 5 kids were with us. They constantly wanted to use my iPad to watch movies and my phone to watch YouTube. I set firm limits. 1 movie, and I kept hold of my phone if they wanted a meme song or something. They do not know how to entertain themselves well, and it is kind of crazy. Understand that being a kid can get boring fast, and they did not have much to do with them. I got them playing physical games after everyone was too attached to my phone one afternoon. Hide and seek in a big villa and sardines was a good idea until I had an asthma attack from all the dust we kicked up hiding in weird places. So yeah, not having things at your fingertips. This is from a kid who had Sky Television and a PlayStation 2 in their bedroom. My mom severely limited my screen time if it was not a school day. Thinking back, I did not get much screen time on a school day either. Story 137. Getting a new gadget that did something you couldn't do before was exciting. Nowadays, your phone does everything. Kids today will never know the feeling of getting that first iPod and how amazing it felt to carry your entire music library everywhere. Or those early car global positioning system devices which were mind-blowing at the time. Story 138. Staying up past 11 o'clock just to watch Star Trek and the Twilight Zone reruns. Also, reruns. Also, watching any show on a schedule. Story 139. Disappearing for hours at a time with no way of communicating with your family about when you would be back. I used to carry 10 pence in the small watch pocket in my jeans to call on a pay phone if there was an emergency. But since I lived in a rural area, it was probably quicker to find and then knock on a stranger's door and ask to use their phone. Fortunately, this eventually never happened. I carried change in this pocket well into my adult years because old habits die hard. Story 140. Waiting for a certain time for your favorite show to come on. Binge watching a show did not really exist unless they were reruns or marathons. Now a show comes out and you have to dodge spoilers like a professional boxer. Story 141. On the weekends, I would go from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. without hearing from my parents. I would be greeted upon my return with dinner and questions about how my day was. This was normal among my friends as well. Story 142. There were consequences for their actions and words. If we stepped out of line, we would get a clip around the ear, and if my dad heard about it, he would also hit me with his belt. Story 143. Activity all the time. Hobbies like sewing, dance class, gymnastics, gardening, baking, hanging out with friends, hula hooping, skating, biking, and swimming. Always doing something. Story 144. Turning the channel on the black and white television to ultra-high frequency, and then adjusting the antenna to try to receive any signal beyond channel 13. Story 145. Going from the digital dark ages to the internet. From landlines to cellular phones. In the late 90s, it all started to grow rapidly and changed many things. Story 146. Being grounded and sent to your room was actually a punishment. Story 147. Going from no computers to computers and from dial-up to Ethernet. From Skype, Microsoft Network, and America Online Messenger to LiveJournal, Tumblr, PostSecret, and MySpace to Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The invention and explosion of Google. The year 2000 problem. Damn, being a millennial is fascinating. Also, now I have zero social media except Reddit, I guess, and I hate all these companies. Story 148. Sitting in boredom. Not saying we did it well, but we did not have electronic devices to entertain us at every given moment. Story 149. Every time you called your girlfriend or boyfriend, you had to go through the dad barrier or the mom barrier. They would always answer the phone, and you would say, "Hello, Mr. Anderson." "Thank you, Mr. Anderson." "Is Tina available, sir?" "Thank you, sir." It was exhausting. Story 150. Going to the library to use the encyclopedia to finish your research project. Story 151. Turning the large dial on the television built into a cabinet, which rotated the giant antenna on the roof to achieve the best signal for Saturday morning cartoons. Story 152. Growing up listening to the baby boomers centering themselves in the universe. Story 153. Life without smartphones and phones in general. Everyone knew when and where to meet friends. As a child, I would travel dozens of kilometers a day to see my friends. The joys of country life. Story 154. The Board of Education. It was back in 1967 when corporal punishment was being phased out. It hung in front of the woodshop teacher's podium. It looked a lot like a canoe paddle. I heard of it being used a couple of times and saw it once. The snarky little girl it was used on tried to blink back tears, even though the teacher did not swing very hard. The humiliation was worse than the pain. Story 155. Why computer directories are named folders. Kids nowadays might enter high school without ever seeing a manila folder, which is what the folder icon represents. Story 156. Getting called from another room to change the television channel for your father sitting in his recliner. Story 157. Having to look at the television guide to plan ahead what time your show was on or to program the videocassette recorder only to have some newscast run late and you miss the last 10 minutes of the recording. Story 158. Watching some random show on television with parents in the living room and then not moving a muscle after you see it's past your bedtime. Or probably hearing no in parenting. Story 159. Television shows that had more than 25 episodes per season, and you had to wait a week to see a new episode. If you were lucky, they would rerun it on Sunday. Story 160. You can take a physical copy of a movie or game and lend it to your friend to play without worrying about logins or internet access. Story 161. Completing entire school projects using an encyclopedia and borrowing 7 books from the library. Story 162. No talking on the phone while someone is using the internet. Story 163. Merry-go-rounds were the best part of the playground. Story 164. Being able to call information, provide a name and city, and the operator would give you their phone number. Story 165. Acoustic coupler modem. Do not pick up the phone. I am on the internet. Story 166. Having to type on a typewriter. What I would have given for spell check. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.